Hello there, this is L24 News, streaming live from the capital Algiers, and these are today's headlines. The Palestinian Health Ministry announced 4 Palestinians were killed and more than 40 others wounded during a Zionist military raid. After the outward victory of the yes to the annexation of the 4 occupied Ukrainian regions, the United Nations and the EU have made it clear that they will not recognize these results. Cuban officials said that many parts of Cuba were left without electricity right after Hurricane Ian swept through the western end of the country. India declared Islamic PFI group and its affiliates as unlawful, accusing them of having links with terrorist groups. Hello again and welcome. I'm your host Abdurrahim Kashour, and those were today's top stories. In an exclusive statement to Algerian international channel, the L24 News, Hussam Zaki, Assistant Secretary General of the Arab League, expressed his satisfaction and optimism regarding the preparations of the Arab League summit. Let's hear it.
تحضيرات ممتازة جدا.
Excellent preparations. All resources are available to have a successful summit. Algeria should be proud of its International Conference Center. The organizing committee worked very hard since the last visit. I think the General Secretariat team, which I have the honor to chair in this visit, is very satisfied with the preparations. Preparations herald of a successful summit.
الاستعدادات شيء ممتاز وإن شاء الله يبشر بقمة ناجحة.
The Palestinian Health Ministry announced 4 Palestinians were killed and more than 40 others wounded during a Zionist military raid on Wednesday in the occupied West Bank town of Jenin. The Zionist military said troops arrived at the Jenin refugee camp to arrest 2 Palestinians suspected of involvement in recent shooting attacks. When soldiers surrounded a house in the camp, an explosive device detonated, a gunfight followed, and forces fatally shot the 2 Palestinian suspects. To a different matter now, the government in Burkina Faso said that at least 11 soldiers have been dead and killed and 50 other civilians were missing after armed fighters attacked a 150-vehicle military escorted convoy taking supplies to a northern town in the country. A statement released by the Burkinabe government said the assault took place in some province where armed groups linked to Al-Qaeda and the ISIS groups have escalated attacks and seized territory since 2015. To Russia-Ukraine fight after the outward victory of the yes to the annexation of the 4 occupied Ukrainian regions. The United Nations and EU have made it clear that they will not recognize the result of the pro-Russian referendums, while the president of Ukraine has called for an isolation of the Kremlin in all international organizations.
Pro-Moscow authorities in occupied Luhansk claim that residents in the region voted to join Russia in referendums the US and Western allies have dismissed as illegitimate. According to Russian-styled election officials, 93% of the ballots cast in the Zaporozhye region supported annexation, as did 87% in Kherson region, 98% in the Luhansk region, and 99% in Donetsk.
The question is, are you in favor of joining Russia as territorial entity of Russian Federation? 1,636,300 participants of the referendum responded yes. 60,555 participants of the referendum responded no. The election has taken place.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky derided Kremlin-run referenda in occupied regions of Ukraine as a farce in his nightly video address on Tuesday.
Українці, українки, Щойно взяв участь в засіданні Ради безпеки ООН.
Ukrainians, I have just taken part in a meeting of the UN Security Council. The crime of aggression against our state, the farce in the occupied territory, which the occupiers called referenda, the preparation of another attempt to annex Ukrainian territory.
Фарс на окупованій території, які окупанти.
The United States in turn said it will be tabling a resolution condemning the referendums being held in eastern Ukraine.
The United States will be tabling a resolution condemning the sham referenda being held in Ukrainian territory. We know the outcomes of these these sham referenda were predetermined in Moscow.
The EU, for its part, has denounced the falsified results of the referendums and has considered it yet another violation of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity.
There will be consequences for everyone who participates in these illegal, illegitimate referendums. But we do not want to comment on the process of preparing the sanctions list at this time.
The leaders of breakaway republics of Donetsk and Luhansk in eastern Ukraine are on their way to Moscow to formalize their annexation to Russia, following the referendums held in 4 territories controlled by Russian troops, in which most of the voters supported this option.
In the same line of thought, the Russian Security Council Deputy Chairman Dmitry Medvedev said on his Telegram channel on Tuesday that NATO alliance will not interfere if Russia uses nuclear weapons in response to Ukrainian aggression. The message said, let's imagine that Russia is forced to use its most formidable weapons against the Ukrainian regime, which has committed a large-scale act of aggression that is endangering the very existence of our state. I believe that NATO will not directly interfere in the conflict, even in this. Cuban officials said that many parts of Cuba were left without electricity right after Hurricane Ian swept through the western end of the country early on Tuesday evening, leaving a path of destruction in its wake. At night, Havana residents walk on the streets in complete darkness, illuminated only by the headlights of the passing cars.
Right now, the electrical system is going through an exceptional condition. There is complete zero in the system. This means there is no electrical service in all of the country. The system was already under strain with the passage of Hurricane Ian. We had a large area in the western part of the country without any service, including Havana, which is an important part of the service. Within those conditions, there were relatively high power transfers for the eastern zone from the units that were generated in the western zone, and a failure occurred.
In the same story, after devastating many areas in Cuba, causing blackout in the island, Hurricane Ian is approaching the west coast of Florida, with residents and authorities preparing to face storm which bring heavy floods. Islam Seed.
Category 3 Hurricane Ian swept through western Cuba on Tuesday without casualties, but left behind countless scenes of destruction. The U.S. National Hurricane Center said the storm would approach the west coast of Florida on Wednesday. A state of emergency was declared throughout the state. Authorities have ordered evacuations to the most vulnerable areas near the ocean, and residents were on alert in the face of what they called an extremely dangerous intense hurricane. Ian was 375 kilometers from Sarasota in Florida on Tuesday afternoon and was advancing with sustained winds of 195 kilometers per hour. The governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, warned that some areas will be vulnerable to catastrophic floods and deadly storm waves.
And so people in southwest Florida, this is going to likely make landfall as a Category 4 hurricane. There will be catastrophic flooding and life-threatening storm surge. Right now in the state of Florida, there's about 8,000 customers that are out of power. That's mostly in southeast Florida due to some of the things that we have seen. But of course, that number will be into the millions relatively shortly. You're going to see widespread power outages as a result of Hurricane Ian making landfall and then working its way through the state of Florida.
Tampa residents are fleeing the area for higher ground as floods loom to hit the county because many people live in low-lying neighborhoods.
Orlando, as we evacuated, of course we had a disagreement on evacuating. My husband wanted to stay in a 24-floor high-rise. to watch the storm come in, and I wanted to play it safe and evacuate. So, as you can see, I won. We're in Orlando, and we're safe.
On the other hand, U.S. President Joe Biden has approved the federal emergency assistance for 24 of Florida's 67 counties and assured them federal support to deploy food, shelter, and help after the storm passes.
I want to be clear about two main messages. First, my administration is on alert and in action to help the people of Florida. I've approved Florida's request for emergency assistance immediately upon receiving it from the governor when they received it. And I directed my team to surge federal assistance there before the storm hit.
Ian succeeds Hurricane Fiona, which devastated Canada's Atlantic coast on Saturday, killing 3 people, after the Caribbean last week when 7 people died.
In Asia, Vietnam on Wednesday downgraded Typhoon Nuru to a tropical depression, but warned residents to stay on alert because of the risk from flooding and landslides caused by heavy rain. More than 200,000 people have taken refuge in shelters in Vietnam, as meteorologists have identified Nuru as one of the most important storms to hit the country of the Southeast Asia. Authorities announced on Tuesday evening that they had evacuated nearly 260,000 people from their homes, including in the tourist town of Hoi An.
When the typhoon hit the ground, there was a lot of thunder and lightning. The wind was blowing hard on the trees, and a big tree fell in front of my house.
The EU has said leaks into major gas pipelines from Russia to Europe were caused by sabotage, but stopped short of directly accusing Russia. Deliberated disruption would result in strongest possible response, as the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, said. Nabil Khazini.
Is Europe on the brink of an energy war, or has it really started? Speculations have now mounted after mysterious explosions have severely and possibly permanently damaged the Nord Stream 1 and 2 gas pipelines. 2 pipelines of a strategic importance under the waters of the Baltic Sea. So what has actually happened? Poland fears is the result of sabotage.
Today we are dealing with an act of sabotage. We don't yet know the details of what happened, but we can clearly see that it was an act of sabotage. It is an act that probably signifies a new step in the escalation of the situation in Ukraine.
A position backed with some kind of uncertainty from Washington, D.C.
The leaks are under investigation. There are initial reports indicating that this may be the result of an attack or some kind of sabotage, but these are initial reports and we haven't confirmed that yet.
The European Commission President warned of the strongest possible response in the event of an attack on active European energy infrastructure.
Any deliberate disruption of active European energy infrastructure is unacceptable and will lead to the strongest possible response.
The answer was quick from Moscow. The Kremlin has asked who the EU will punish with this strongest possible response for the damage done to the gas pipelines, citing a Polish politician having identified the United States as the party behind the apparent sabotage.
It's obvious that there is some kind of destruction of the pipe. As to what the reason is before the results of the investigation appear, no version could be excluded.
The series of the unusual leaks on the 2 natural gas pipelines running from Russia under the Baltic Sea to Germany has overshadowed the inauguration of a long-awaited pipeline that will bring Norwegian gas to Poland to bolster Europe's energy independence from Moscow. How not, when the incident represents a major escalation in the row between Russia and the West.
The International Monetary Fund has criticized the UK government's mini-budget, saying plans to cut taxes and spending will increase inequality and counteract the Bank of England's monetary policy. The IMF urged the government to consider more targeted support for families and businesses.
Lots of market investors and increasingly international institutions, we've heard from the IMF today, are thinking that there's a bit of a credibility gap in the government's economic plans and its economic strategy. The government took a major gamble last week with its plans. It's effectively betting the house on growth, and it's gambling that its package of tax cuts and some rather vague promised supply side reforms to the economy will deliver substantially higher growth and make the sums add up. And I think what you've got is markets taking a look, looking at the government's plans for the public finances, looking at the political challenges around, for example, reforming planning or making it easier to deliver large infrastructure projects, and concluding that they just don't buy.
Joe Biden will host a number of Pacific leaders in Washington for U.S. Pacific Island Summit, which begins Wednesday. The first time Pacific leaders have been invited to the White House for such a meeting. The summit is an attempt by the U.S. to strengthen ties with Pacific countries and has been widely seen as a response to China's growing engagement in the region. China's State Council affirmed that only with unswerving containment of Taiwan independence aspirations can peaceful development of cross-strait relations be ensured, which can guarantee cross-strait peace, stability and peaceful reunification of China.
To safeguard China's sovereignty and territorial integrity, it's absolutely a disact for us to take firm and strong measures to oppose and contain Taiwan independent separatist activities and interference by external forces. The DPP authorities distorted facts, confused public opinion, and smeared the mainland's principles and policies on the work related to Taiwan.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken received Pakistani Foreign Minister Bilwal Bhutto Zardari at the State Department to discuss Pakistan flood relief and the 75th anniversary of U.S.-Pakistan relations. U.S. Secretary defended his country's military aid and arms sales to Pakistan, especially a maintenance program for the F-16 aircraft, despite strong criticism from India. The unprecedented floods in Pakistan have costed nearly $30,000 billion and damaged 1 million homes, also causing more than 1,600 deaths and tens of thousands of injuries. Miriam Zian tackled the story in this report.
The unprecedented catastrophic floods that hit Pakistan have cost the country a whopping $28 billion in physical damages and a 5% upsurge in poverty. For weeks, hundreds of thousands of flood victims in Pakistan have been living either in the open or in the decrepit camps of improvised tents, most of them having limited supplies of food and water. The devastating floods have killed over 1,600 people and displaced millions. In Balochistan's provincial capital of Quetta, dozens of children were heard reciting out loud lessons taught under a tent at a relief camp, where a local NGO had set up a temporary school to bring the classroom to them. On Monday, China announced it will send a medical team and a disaster assessment team to flood-hit Pakistan.
Immediately announced 100 million yuan of emergency humanitarian assistance, including 25,000 tents and other materials urgently needed.
In the same initiative, the U.S. Secretary of State said on the same day that the U.S. would provide an extra $10 million to help Pakistan recover deadly flooding.
And today, I'm pleased to announce another $10 million in food security assistance. This will provide urgent supplies to help farmers recover, like seeds and fertilizer. Assistance repairing critical irrigation infrastructure damaged by the floods.
But in recorded history, the country has not had floods of this magnitude, and experts believe that the disaster is related to climate change. Pakistan's foreign minister said Islamabad is seeking climate justice and looking toward its partners for assistance in recovering from the calamity.
Pakistan's global carbon emissions are 0.8%, but we are amongst the 10 most climate-stressed countries on the planet, and the climate catastrophe that we are facing today is not of our making.
The devastation wreaked by the floods this summer in Pakistan has highlighted the disproportionate effect of climate change on impoverished nations.
India declared the Islamic PFI group and its affiliates as unlawful, accusing them of having links with terror groups and banning them for 5 years. The ban came after authorities detained more than 100 PFI members this month, whereas this latter denies the allegation and held nationwide protests against their raids in recent days. Protests continue to sweep Iranian cities and many other cities around the world for the 11th night in a row after the death of Mahsa Amini. At least 41 people have died during the protests. The demonstrators call for justice for Amini's death, who allegedly died by hands of the country's police while visiting Tehran. The United Nations spokesman said that UN is watching closely the situation in Iran. Mr. Stephen Dujarric said that the United Nations urged Tehran to refrain from using what he said were unnecessary force during protests.
You know, looking at what's going on today, we're obviously concerned about the reports of peaceful protests being met by excessive use of force, leading to dozens of deaths and injuries. We call on security forces to refrain from using unnecessary and disproportionate force and appeal to all to exercise restraint to avoid further escalation.
Dozens of people gathered outside the Iranian embassies in Buenos Aires and Athens to demonstrate for women's rights in Iran, following the death of the 22-year-old Mahsa Amini, who died in custody due to police brutality or rather harsh treatment in mid-September. Zara Furjani.
Mahsa Amini's death garnered international attention. Women in Argentina and Greece took to the streets outside the Iranian embassy Tuesday to protest the death of 22-year-old Kurdish woman who was detained by vice police in Iran in mid-September.
We believe that solidarity between women and dissidents in Argentina and Iran is fundamental, because the battle they're waging is part of the more general struggle we are waging against a capitalist and patriarchal system that oppresses us, that deprives us of our rights. And that's what we're here for.
We came here to shout our rights. We want freedom for women, freedom for humanity. We want this regime to get out of the country.
Protests in Iran are continuing for the 12th consecutive night. Activists, lawyers, and journalists all around the country are raising their voices over the death of Mahsa Amini. Women are at the forefront of these demonstrations.
All I want to do is go there and fight or just help in any way. I feel really helpless, but I'm very, very glad to be seeing this happening. I'm very glad that Argentinians are responding.
Mahsa Amini was arrested for not wearing the hijab in accordance with government standards. Iranian police have denied harming the young girl, saying she fell ill as she waited with other detained women. However, eyewitnesses detained with Amini said she was severely beaten.
Saudi Arabia Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has been appointed Prime Minister in a cabinet shuffle Tuesday, according to a royal decree. The Crown Prince has already been the kingdom's de facto ruler for years, previously served as Deputy Prime Minister under King Salman, as well as a Defense Minister. And now for more international news, let's follow this roundup.
Mexico's President Andrés Manuel López Obrador announced on Tuesday the resignation of the special prosecutor leading the Attorney General's office's investigation into the abduction and disappearance of 43 students in 2014. Omar Gomez was appointed to head the probe in 2019. Rights group representing families of 43 disappeared students says resignation extremely concerning for pursuit of justice.
Attack on the U.S. Capitol jury selection has begun in one of the most serious cases to emerge. The January 6 hearings replied video of rioters hunting the vice president. The founder of the far-right Oath Keepers extremist group and 4 associates are charged with seditious conspiracy.
North Korea fired a ballistic missile off its east coast on Wednesday, South Korea's military said, as South Korea and the U.S. staged joint naval exercises involving an aircraft carrier. The launch came 2 days after South Korea and the U.S. forces launched their military exercise in the waters off South Korea's east coast involving an aircraft carrier.
Chilean scientists recently uncovered several remains of elephant predecessors dating back 12,000 years near Lake Tagua, a glacial finger lake in southern Chile. Gum feathers, an extant relative of modern elephant, roamed southern Chile thousands of years ago and might have been the target of group hunts by inhabitants of the region.
With this roundup, we reach the end of our world news. For more updates, you can follow our social media platform: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Thank you for watching. Take care.